You don't have to watch all of them, right? You can skip forward just in case you forgot something. So the last class we talked about how we collect data, how we get the information, and you did it. You did the experiment. You asked a question. I think it's kind of fun, a fun way to look at like, I can get this information. What we're going to do now for this chapter is that we're going to organize our data. And you did it by make the table, you do the bar graphs, and then you do the pie chart. And that's what we're going to learn to do it in the next couple of days. So we'll look at the table and we'll look at the bar graphs and we're going to create those, okay? So let's look at, for today, we're going to look at frequency table. Give me 1 second. I need to move to the next. I'm going to start the class. I will go back. Like you do have a check-in point every day, just in case some of you still not sure what that check-in grade means. Is that I'm go back to Pear Deck and look at the names, look at who participate, how much work you put in, and you get the score for the day. If you have not logged into Pear Deck, you didn't do anything, you not email me your work. Some of you in this one, I do in a piece of paper. It's really hard for me to write on Pear Deck, and I like to follow what you do. So I do everything on a paper. That is fine. Just email the work to me, and then I'll give you a point for the day. Okay. All right. So for this unit, last unit we talked about how we collect those. This unit, we're going to talk about we already collected data, but what we're going to do with that data is that we're going to have to analyze the data, and we're going to describe the data, and then we're going to make predictions. So that's the next steps. We can look at data that given to us. We have to organize that somehow, because you think about when you collect your responses, you have a bunch of people say yes, a bunch of people say no. It's hard to look at that data, right? I believe Alfonso group shared with me earlier, when people say yes or no to Chinese and versus Mexican food, and they have names, would say yes or no. Or is that Elena group? I forgot which group, but they have like names and the response for that person. It's kind of hard to look at it. It's not give me a visual. It doesn't help me to visualize what is happening and give me a better idea of what my data is, right? But when you sort them into the table, you sort them into graphs, it's look much better. And you're like, okay, I see more people refer this, more people like this versus the other. So we need to organize it. We need to analyze it. We need to organize it so we can analyze the data better instead of have everything all over, okay? So for this lessons, we will take a look at okay, Elena, I got your message. Anthony, thank you. I'll check in with Miguel later. Thank you. So what we're going to do with this one is called the frequency distribution, which is the table that you create. But if we have more than 30 people and our questions involve like money, right, incomes, how much you make, then it's really hard for you to list them out one by one. So what we do is instead of make the table like 0 pet, 1 pet, 2 pets, or 2 or 3, we're going to split them up, and we create, it's called an interval. We're going to turn into chunks from 0 to 5, from 6 to 10. We changed it so that way we can include everyone in the data, right? So that we call the first column. So think about the table that you create. The first column is called the classes or the interval. And that's the one that you did. But now we just have to give a formal names for it. So the first column from the table that you create is called the classes or interval. And the second column, when you put down your result, is called the frequency, which is the second column. So you did the frequency table not knowing that you did it. But what the table that you create, that is the frequency table. Okay? The first column, the name will be classes. The second columns with the numbers that you enter in, that's the frequency. Question for me so far? Right? So let's go back and look at this table. So now it's just going to be a little bit more formal on frequency table. We have a class. Remember, like I told you, you don't have to list out the way you did it. You put 0, 1, 2, 3, and then you list how many people have 0 pet, how many people have 1 pet as siblings, or some of you have about the colors, what you like, right? So that column called the class. And then the result is the frequency, how many people for that group. Okay, so we need to identify the term. We need to understand the table first before we're going to create it. So for today, we're going to focus on understand the values, understand the names of the table. So that's the focus for today. I saw some of you put in the chat, so I'm going to take a look. Okay, yeah, Miss Munoz, type in what I just said in the chat if you need it. The first one we can look as we call the lower class limit. That's the term. You need to know this because when I say what is the lower class limit, you know exactly what values I'm looking at. The lower class limit is the least number that belong to the class. So I'm going to highlight a couple of things. This is a class. That's one class, 1 through 5. That's one class. Then I have 6 through 10. That's another class. Then I have 11 to 15. That is another class. A class are the interval, a chunk of numbers. So each of these is one class. So the one that I highlight, that is one class. The lower class limit is the least number. So let's look at the first class. Look at this one right here. You have 1 through 5. Which one is the least number? Is this a 1 or is this a 5? That's a question you ask. So we can identify the lower class limit. So the first class, I have 1 through 5. The least number is the smaller value. So the lower class limit for the first class would be 1, which is this one right here. Okay. Then I will move on to my second class. Can someone guess what is the lower class limit? What values would I use? It's gonna be 6. Good. Right? Because this is the lower values. Now move on to the next class. Thank you, Winston. That's correct. What will be the next lower class limit for my next class? So I'll move on to the third one. Okay, Elena, Brandon, you jump one class. You skip one class. So it's going to be 11. Yes, that's good. Okay. Then I will move to the next one, which is right here, which is Brandon already shared, which is 16. Then the next one. Can you guys give me the next two? Elena, thank you, 21. And then the last one, my last class, 26. So I will look at the class. The first values for each class is called the lower class limit. Okay. Now, I'm going to move on to the next one, which I think most of you already guessed what that would be, the upper class limit. That is the bigger number. So you want to guess what are my upper class limit? Do you want to guess that? So right now I have my lower class is 1. So I'm going to go back to the first class again. The lower is 1, so the upper is going to be 5. So my upper class will be 5. Then I will go to my second class. Can you guess what would that number next? What is the next number that I will use for upper? 10. Thank you. Let's move on to the next class. What would that be? 15. Thank you. Can we list the next 3? Instead of get one by one, we can list the next 3. Okay, so Winston, Elena, Brandon, 10, 15, and then the other one is 20. Thank you. 25 and 30. Yes, that's correct. Winston, 25, and then 30. So the upper class limit is the second values for that interval. So lower class limit, upper class limit. Questions for me? So if you want to highlight this one, I can say this first column is the lower class limit, and then this one is going to be represent the upper class limit. All right. So the table that you created, it just one. It's possible you have a chunk, an interval, we call it class, or you just have one number like what you create, which is fine. It doesn't have to be an interval. It doesn't have to be one number. It could be either one, depend on how many data that we have. Sometimes we have to put them in chunks because we have so many. Okay. All right. So questions for me on upper and lower class limit before I move on to class width and range. Okay, the class width. Think about this. The name itself, it say class width. That means I'm only focused on the class columns. I'm going to focus for each class. I'm not going to focus anything else. This one right here tell me it's a class, right? What I need to do is I need to clear this one so we can use this information. Okay. So I want to remind you, each interval is one class. Each interval is represent one class. Okay. So to find the class width, you would take the upper limit. So upper limit minus the lower limit. That would give you the class width. So what I would do in here is that you don't have to do for all the classes. Choose one to do. I normally choose the first one because it's just a smaller number, that's all. You don't have to choose the first one. So I'm going to choose one class. And I will subtract. I will take the upper limit minus the lower limit. That will give me the class width. So 5 minus 1 give me 4. So the class width for this table is 4. You want to test out with the other one, you can do this one. You can do 20 minus 16, which also give you 4. So the class width is going to be the same. So it doesn't matter which one you choose, it will give you the same number. So just choose one, and that will give you the class width. So the class width is when you take the upper limit minus the lower limit. That will give you the distance in between, which is 4. Okay, so choose one class. You don't have to do for all of them. You may have more than one, but choose one. That's all you need to do. So class width, take the higher values minus the lower values, the upper class limit minus the lower class limit to get the class width. So question from me on class width. Okay. Andrew, thank you. Just tell Miguel I will post the video. I will share the link for what he missed today. He can watch the video for what he missed. Okay, Austin, that is fine. It's okay. So question for the class width before I move on to range. It's the last vocab that we're going to talk for the day, and then I will ask you to do something as a check-in point, like an extra slip right after this. Okay. For the range, so for the range is different. The range you're going to focus for the entire column. So the range is you're going to look at the entire column. You don't just look at one class, okay? Class width, you look at one class and that would help you. But for the range, it's going to be the entire thing, okay? What you do is the difference between the maximum and the minimum data. So the maximum is the highest values. In this column, the highest value would be 30, minus the minimum, which is the lowest one, which is 1. So the range is 29. So that's the difference between the class width and the range. Okay, the range is, I'm looking for the entire column, the highest minus the lowest. The class width, I'm only focused on one class. So that's the difference. Okay, that's the difference between class width and the range. Questions? All right, what I want to do right now, I'm going to want to do a quick check-in. So I will show you a table, and I'm going to ask you to identify the following information. You can do in paradox. I do a piece of paper.